Hi everybody, this is Galahad Wernsing, Chief Magician for Holy Grail Labs, and today I will be walking through installing one of our fuse box blade fuse retrofit kits on my E28 turbo diesel. So the first thing you're going to want to do is lay out all the tools you need. I have the kit, pair of pliers, a couple of screwdrivers, and I'll show what tools you, all the tools you need at the end. After you've got all that set, you're going to want to remove the battery, which I've already done, and remove all of the fuses and relays in the box. And I'm going to do that quickly. I apologize for any wind noise or whatever. I'm doing this outside because I don't have anywhere indoors to work at the moment. All right, we're lucky that this one doesn't have any major melting problems around fuse 17 or 13 and 14. That's especially right here is the most common place for melting issues, but they don't present all that big of an issue for installation. It's just a little bit easier if it's clean like this one. You do need to remove all the relays. It's just much easier that way. I'm going to try and not block the camera view. And you're going to want to pop the relays off of the side just to make things a little bit easier for you in the future. That one would come off, would be great. And you're going to want to unplug the main connector on the side for the engine harness. Now, one of the few differences between this diesel and the normal US cars is the cruise control actuator is normally here. So if it's a lot easier to do this if you remove the cruise control actuator. It's 3, I think it's 10 millimeter nuts. On the diesels, it's over here, so you don't need to do it. It'd be really nice if this came off. There we go. Pull these out. Now that you have your fuse box empty, you're going to want to get a Phillips head screwdriver and remove these 2 screws. Do not undo this. It's a real pain to put back together. It is the main positive supply for most of the relays. So you don't need to undo this one, just these 2. And I think these are a Phillips 2. Screwdriver doesn't say what it is. And put those screws to the side. And now there's 3 little clip posts that you have to release. One right here, one right here, and one right here. And you can just sort of squeeze the box and pull off. And now I've found it easier to, oh, can you see that? No, you can't see that. Okay. Let's go back to this view. The little chassis wire harness clippy thing here If you bend that out of the way, you release a lot of tension on this lower harness, and that can help flip this over. And then up here, the routing, again, the routing's a little bit different because of the diesel, but I should be able to get enough stretch to be able to flip this box. The other thing you can do is when I get there, I'll remove the lower half to get us a little bit more clearance. So pull that out, open this up a bit, pull this out, pull that, undo the engine harness, pull this plug. So now this is pretty free. This seems a bit freer than the non-diesel cars. The other thing you're going to want to look at right now, US cars, this is bridged right here. Let me zoom in. There. Yeah, US cars, these two are connected, and cars with European front lighting harnesses, these are separated. So what you're going to want to do is, if they're the same, you can install the kit as is. If these are separated here, so if these two look sort of like these two, they're not connected in the middle, you're going to want to pull out this fuse and then swap this one for the one you just pulled out, for the 15 amp. And that's just because the headlight wiring for the Euro cars and the US cars is slightly different. All right, so I'm just gonna try and pull out the lower box. That's two 10mm nuts up here that you need to loosen. Can you see that? Nope, you can't. There's two 10mm nuts holding little keeper things up here. That would be cool if they loosened. I am not right-handed. This is somewhat difficult to try and not block you guys. I'm going to get a ratchet. Be back in a minute. All right, so once you've removed those clips, trying not to block the view here, this lower shell you can just lift out of the way, and then you get a lot more space to flip the main box over. And you're going to want to be able to flip it both directions, because this way, if you flip it towards you, it's easier to get it this side of the fuse box, and if you flip it the other way, you can get to the far side more easily sometimes. Here's an interesting thing I can show you guys. Now, this was a really clean fuse box without any melting issues, but if we look down in this corner, you can still see some really heavy discoloration of the plastic from thermal heat cycling down here. So even on cars that, you know, visually look okay, you're still getting heat damage inside of your fuse boxes. Luckily, the really high current ones over here that normally melt are okay in this box. The other thing to be aware of is very occasionally, and I don't know like how to predict it, so I don't know what cars this applies to, but occasionally I've found a fuse box where this connection and 4, maybe 5 others, they all come from relays into a fuse socket, is soldered and not clipped. So if you get to this point and see a soldered connection and don't have a soldering iron, you're going to want to either find a friend that does or get a soldering iron so that you can undo these. So here's a really good check. So this one will be soldered if any of them are, and I've only encountered 4 or 5 cars with this out of 40 or 50 I know of that I like have installation details for, so it's not hugely common, but it is something that comes up. Now what you're going to want to do when the fuse box is like this, you need to take a ton of photos so that you can get all the wires back into the same positions that you took them out of. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I've done this before. And I also have a spare that I can check against, so I'm going to skip taking photos. But unless you already have a spare fuse box, and even if you do, you should take a whole lot of photos so that you don't accidentally plug something back in where it shouldn't be. And then the next step is to use, not these, you want pointy needle nose pliers. And that's because if you just pull on this plastic bit, they have a tendency to break. So for the ones with little plastic housings, what you want to do is you want to, and I'm trying to do this with, you want to get in here and like grab the metal part of the connector and then sort of wiggle it off. Like that, so that you're not pulling on the wire, because that can break the wire. And if you pull on these, especially the like discolored ones, that one's probably going to break if you just pull on the plastic. And if you break one of the plastic things, don't worry. They're just there to make it a little bit easier to plug in. They're not electrically necessary or anything. So I'm gonna pause the video and we shall return when I have all of these unplugged. All right, everybody, and we're back. We have disconnected all the wires on the bottom and taken photos, remember. And now comes the fun part. And we're gonna zoom in a little bit. Getting rid of all the previous generation fuse holders. Now for this, I've done a few of these myself, and I've tried Dremels, I've tried all kinds of stuff. I found the easiest is to get, let's see if I can focus, a small flathead, a sort of medium-sized flathead, and a pair of decently sized pliers. And there's a couple of different clip types you need to be aware of. The first is like this double bar kind. Then there's the upper side that's just a little single unit. And then all the lower side are identical except this one. Easiest one to do, pardon the reach, the easiest one to do is these double ones where you take your pair of pliers and you grab one of these and you sort of pull up like this. And what you're trying to do is open up a little bit of space for one of your 2 screwdrivers. And if you only got a little bit, you start with the smaller screwdriver and you sort of wedge it in there and you just push and rotate till you've got some space. Then you take the bigger screwdriver and shove it in here, and what you want to do is you want to get it sort of towards one side and pull, you're trying to pull that side up, and see it just popped out. And then you can use you can use your pliers to pull that out, and then you can either work harden it off here and pull the what's left of the pin out the back, which is depends on reach and whatnot, or you can sort of grab it and just pull it out the top. So that's how you do this kind. And a general warning is when you're prying, you want to be doing twisting motions. You don't want to be doing like up and down motions, because you end up, if you do that, you end up putting pressure on the outside of the box, especially like right in here, and you can crack it, which you don't want to do. I mean, frankly, it's just cosmetic, but if there's better ways to do it, why not do the better ways? These smaller ones are similar. Some of them have pins on both sides, some of them have pins on just one side, and you can sort of tell visually, like this one just has one on this side. This side's kind of flat and not bent over, and this side's bent over. It's probably easier to see. Let me pull out the other box. So if we look at the other box, yeah, this one right here, you can see the left-hand side doesn't go through the box, but the right-hand side does. And then this one here, both sides go into the box. All of the bottom ones go in on both sides, except for this one right here. This one, some of the upper ones only have one connection. All of the lower side ones in the bottom two rows have two connections. And the other funny bit, as an aside, about this box is I got this just as a spare one on eBay to do reference work with. The previous owner of this box decided enough was enough and soldered in a what used to be a 25 amp blade fuse, and it clearly didn't work. Like, this is still melted. This ended up melting into the top case, and the fuse is actually still good. So I think my solution's a bit better than what we're working with here. So for this kind, the approach is similar. Yeah, you can see that. You sort of pull it up like this, grab the bottom, and oh yeah, sometimes that happens. Where is it? This one just broke off, and that's okay, because when you flip it back over, sometimes it'll just fall out like it did here. Like, you can see the bottom of it just fell out right there. It's a lot easier to pull them out this way if you have little nubby bits left. It's a little bit harder to access because of all the wires down here. I should probably fetch that later. And then the only other kind you really need to worry about is this, these bottom ones, and this is where the tiny screwdriver really comes in handy. So you want to really get in under here. That one's only single-sided. That one's easy. We're going to do the other one. So you need to really get in under here. Really? All of them? Apparently, all three of the top ones are single-sided. So why don't I'll do one in the second row just to show you guys. Pull that up. Shove this in here, get a little gap. Get the other screwdriver, shove this in here. Pull one side out. Come in and pull the other side out. There it is. It takes a little bit to get into the rhythm, but it's really not that hard at all. And then these lower ones are a bit harder to get out. You take your little screwdriver and you really got to work it in there. These are 2 layers of metal instead of just one, and it's kind of a pain, but eventually you can get it in there. Got a little bit of a gap going. And then these often, both sides will pop at the same time. and then you can just grab it with your pliers and pull it out. There we go. Comes out like that. And again, I've tried, you know, Dremel, all kinds of different techniques with screwdriver, and this is the best I've found. It, you know, it takes a little bit of time, but just have some zen about it, and it's not that bad. So I'm gonna pause the video here and come back when I've finished removing all the old style fuse clips. All right, everybody, we are back with the installation video for the fuse board. Now we've gotten all the giant pile of these things removed, the original fuse sockets. And we removed the little paper cardboard thing, and we can see another piece of evidence that there was heating damage. So if you'll note, the actual fuse socket for fuse 14 does not have any melting issues at all in this fuse box, and the 14 and 17 are the most common to have melting issues with. But if we look at the back side of the paper card insert, right where fuse 14 is, we see a lot of thermal damage to the card on the back side, right where the fuse 14 and the top side is the supply from the battery or the relay. Right where that is, and going across, because it was one of those doubled up ones where the bars across the two supply lines, radiating out from the supply pin is just a lot of thermal damage in here. And frankly, this is one of the less bad cards that I've had to deal with. I've had some where it's completely brown or almost blackened. And then down here you can see, I think this is like water damage and ink bleed through from the front. Down here, a little bit of discoloration there. And this card is just used, here's a sort of a static shot of that. This card is just used for guiding installation from the factory. The colors of the wires should match up with the colors on the card, but whether they do now is sort of up in the air and depends on the condition of your car and those sorts of things. Because the wires can fade and the card can fade. Now, we do need to do one other thing to this box, and that is remove these 4 posts. And the best way I've found to do that is, again, with your just use your needle nose pliers and prime off. So get in here, grab them at the bottom, and just sort of twist them off all the way around. These don't need to be very flush. I mean, get them close, but they don't need to be perfect, because the circuit board sits a little bit above this surface. So if there's a little bit of plastic remaining, like sort of like this is good. Get you a little perspective there. This is fine, because if you look at the, if you look in profile, the board sits with this little edge raised above the plastic, and that's just because of how the blades are designed. So once you get all 4 of these removed, come on, then you can move on to installing the actual circuit board from the kit. All right, so once you've gotten all 4 of those posts taken out, we can move on to actually setting this into the board here. The fit should be pretty close out of the packaging, but occasionally some of these will get a little bit tweaked. So if you start to install it and you're feeling a little bit of resistance, get like a different viewpoint on it and see if one of these is sticking, and then you can pull it out. And these are perfectly okay to like grab them with a pair of pliers. Oh, sorry. You can grab these with a pair of pliers and just tweak them a little bit to get them to actually line up with the plastic. Now, the other trick I have for this part is get yourself some WD-40 or liquid wrench. And you want to just spray down the plastic, and you can spray down the backside of this. Your car will smell like WD-40 in the engine bay, but this really reduces the installation friction on the blades, and it's non-conductive, so you don't need to worry about like accidentally turning something on or causing other issues. It's not electrically conductive, so you're okay to do that. And then for actual installation, I've found starting at the bottom and sort of rolling it in like that has worked really well. But it's really, you know, take a look at how things are fitting, and I'm just trying to, sorry if that was out of view, I'm just trying to straighten some of the ones I see are out of alignment. One way to tell is if you look straight down, like this one is a little bit tweaked, and they can get tweaked during shipping too. Like these are really tall compared to the sort of stable base they have. So not a big deal. You're not going to damage them by bending them. Come on. All right, what's sticking? All right, I think, yeah, hold on, sorry about that. If you look, these two are slightly closer together, so I think this one was sticking a little bit. And maybe this one too. You're just trying to get them pretty straight. They do have a little bit of a bevel on them at the tips, I don't know. Yeah, like you probably can see it right there. So if you get them pretty close, they'll just sort of fix themselves on the way in, but it can take a little bit to get the alignment right. So just take your time. I've found that getting the actually getting the old fuse sockets out is the hardest part. And you can also, if you can see one's a little off, you can sort of reach in there and try and fix it. All right, so we got the first row in. All right, that sounded good. All right, there. Not too bad. Don't be afraid to put, you can put a bit of force into them. If you like put a lot of side load on the fuses, you can bend the fuses, but you can always bend those back. And then you really just want to make sure this is good and seated. You can leave a little bit of a gap, like it doesn't have to be perfect, but it is easier if it's all the way flat so that you can, like all the lengths are the same on the back side. Why do you keep doing that? And now, what you gotta do is plug all those wires back in. That's tedious, but that's why you took pictures earlier. The other thing you need to do is hook this up. Hook your ground wire up somehow. And this is just to power the LEDs. You don't need it to run the car. But the little pin for that ends up in one of the holes that ends up on this far side hole that you just, that's the at the bottom of one of those 4 fuse posts. I will generally try and slip it in through here, again using the WD-40. Come on. But sometimes I've gotten lazy and just drilled a hole in the bottom box. And other people have other ways of doing it. One person cut the wire sort of in the middle and then slipped it through this way because they didn't want to damage. Sorry, you can't really see that. Let me zoom out. There's this little rubber boot thing here at the bottom. That's an environmental seal for the bottom side of the box. But as you can see, like with this one starting to rip apart, they do that. Generally, they're pretty stable enough that you can slip this in without any, yeah, like that one was pretty easy. That was one of the easier ones I've done. Sometimes they're harder. And then you can just plug this in right here. And you're gonna wanna use your pliers again to make sure this is seated. Not seated. No. Come on. I'm gonna call that good enough because it's my car. But generally you want it a bit more seated than that. And it can help to, oh, I can show you guys what's going on the back side of this. So it's going into that, let me get something. It's going into this square hole right here. And what you can do is you can take a drill bit and widen this before you install this if you're worried about getting that clip seated. And now once you did that, you just got to plug all these wires back in. If you have one of the boxes that has the soldered connections, you can either resolder it or I would probably, if you think there's enough room, I would crimp a like a normal plug onto it. Again, it's a 1/4 inch connector. And I will pause the video here and then plug all these back in and see you on the other side. All right, everybody, I've got the wires in the back plugged in. It is easier if you, sorry, just tripping over the chair here. It is easier if you unplug this to get some of the wiring back in. So just remember to plug this one back in when you're done. And now it's time to put everything back together. So slip this back where it came from. And there's a little slot thing down here that captures it at the bottom. And then we get our 2 little, these things to hold the top in. I did not actually reinstall the paper card. I find it's personally easier to like have it set out on the like on the shock tower or something to use as a reference instead of putting it back in on the back side. It's just easier for me to see. That's sort of up to you and what you think will be easier for when you put it back together. I did find there were a couple of wiring differences between this and my reference box. One of them, this green and brown one, was a different color. I think it was green and purple. So If you do have a spare box, not every single harness is completely identical. There are little differences in colors, and like some will have 2 wires going into the same connector and some it's only 1 wire. So as always, take a bunch of photos, because even if you have another reference, it's not guaranteed that it's going to be an exact match. Come on. There we go. Now it's starting to tighten up. I'm gonna call that good. That's just sort of a friction fit. And then for getting the box back in, those 3 little clip posts that I mentioned earlier, the 2 up here, and then there's 1 hidden in under the spares. Those can be pretty difficult to line back up because you're clipping it onto this thing right here, and sometimes a wire will get caught. So you don't want to use a huge amount of force to put it back in, because you might be squishing a wire or something. So I found it's easiest to, and we're going to move the relays out of the way down here. I found it's easiest to get the little rubber thingies back in first. There's 1 down there, and then there's 1 up at the top here. Get those little rubber things back in, and then you can sort of reach under and feel if there's any wires interfering down here. It's unlikely that you will end up with a wire caught in either of the top 2. It's really just this bottom one, because all of the wiring is coming in right here, and there's very little like up in these corners. Oh, and we bent this one. Just unbend that, stick it back in. All right, so that one's seated on the first try, and you can sort of feel them click in. And once you have those back in, you want to put the two little Phillips screws you took out back in the box. I'm gonna use a different screwdriver. Now we can see which size. Yeah, it's a Phillips too. This is, yeah, flip that over. Come on, yeah, Phillips 2 is the correct size for these. And then these will do the, like if it's really close, these can do the final squish together. Sometimes it can be difficult to get it completely flush with the bottom box because you moved all those wires around, like they're sticking out and putting like sort of expanding pressure on the back side. And once you're done here, you can go and put your relays back on the sides to make sure you don't catch any wires there. That off, put this one back on, plug the engine harness back in here. Come on. There's that. And you can go and flip all these wires back in under the little chassis capture thingy. I think this goes here on the diesels. I'm not totally sure. This car's a bit of a mess. That's that. Where'd that go? Put this thing back on if you have it. That's just to keep crap from stressing these wires out. And you've got to put all the relays back in. This is the this one's the washer relay. I think if you have the intensive washer or the headlight washers, I think that's what those are for. They're not. There's no wires going to those in the boxes I've dealt with, but I've never dealt with one that has the extended wash system. So the ones with little arrows, the arrows are diodes. So you want to make sure that you put the two with diodes back where they came from. So you will want to take a photo of, I think I mentioned this earlier, but take a photo where the relays go. There's only 5 of them, so if you goof it a little bit, it should be pretty easy to fix. And then the last thing is this is the other end of that ground cable that we stuffed through the gasket here, and that just goes down to, let me get the phone out of the mount. Sorry about that. Pushed the wrong button. This right here is designed to just sit in on the chassis ground right next to your battery. You want, just getting a better angle here. You want the harness ground and the battery ground on the chassis side of this mount, because you don't want to have the electricity go through this, because this is a really low current thing. This is really just to ground it here. Whereas the other ones, like, you're going to be putting all the current of the starter through this, so you want to minimize the total travel path. And you're probably going to want to, like, maybe use some sandpaper and just clean this up and make sure everything's shiny. My wiring is a disaster. Yeah. So that's pretty much that. That's in. I would fire the car up, except I discovered earlier today that my timing belt is just about to let go, and I do not want to sacrifice my engine. You should be able to see it right there. So I'm not gonna be firing this thing up until I get a new timing belt. But once you're at this point, hook this up to the chassis point. You can also hook it up to the battery. That's fine too. Either works. It's just, this is a little bit cleaner, in my opinion, and visually, and it doesn't matter electrically. And you know, I like having as few things as possible, like, on my battery connector, so it's easier to make sure everything's good, because sometimes these can loosen up, and I've had to deal with nonsense on other cars. And then, sorry, this little switch right here, so down is off, up is on. I don't have a battery installed, so it's not going to do anything. But with the car in off, you should have 3 LEDs turned on. I think it's those 2 and that one, maybe? Maybe it's these 2 and that one. They're over in here. If you have more than 3 LEDs, something is probably wrong. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Yep.